G'day viewers, we had an interesting moment in Australian politics this week when former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, who by all accounts should be the forgotten man, a joke, a fucking footnote to an awful part of Australian history, got in the media in a big way by making a speech to a bunch of global warming deniers in London, probably on the Australian taxpayers' dollar. Now, it was remarkable, this speech, in as much as he basically said almost nothing that was true. And it isn't just that with a bit of digging and delving you can undermine what he said. It is that he said stuff that is very easy to demonstrate is untrue, and in fact in most cases the complete opposite of the truth. He's not just not completely right, he was completely wrong in most of what he said. Now, a lot of people laughed at him for that, called him an idiot, say he's just trying to be a wrecker and destabilise Malcolm Turnbull by raising his profile. And there's elements of truth in this. But what's most interesting to me is to look at Abbott and his history and think, why would he say these things that are basically very stupid and the complete opposite of the truth? In a question of science, namely climate science, when you cannot get any qualified scientist to come up with any concrete contradiction to most of the models that show we are in terrible trouble with climate change, he didn't just say he disagreed. He started to call science like voodoo religion. It's like sacrificing goats to the volcano god. So when he has no science on his side, he chooses to say science itself makes no sense, and his opposition to it is the only sensible, logical thing. Just looking at that and trying to deconstruct it, it's like, what the fuck is going on? And yes, it's easy to ascribe stupidity to statements like that. Now, Abbott, objectively, is not very stupid, but when you look at his history, he's driven much more by ideology and his feelings and his impulses and things he truly believes, as opposed to any sort of objective facts that contradict his worldview. Now, looking at that and really analysing what he said, to me, what he's done, it seems to me he's looked at the way the world's going and it's out of his control. He is the epitome of the tired old white Christian man who grew up decades and centuries of being in complete control and is seeing change that seems far too quick, that's taking away stuff he took for granted. A system that let completely mediocre white men dominate everything and shut out everyone who wasn't one of them, no matter how skilled and how qualified they are, and most importantly, do everything in your power to try to deny the others any opportunity to get power and expertise so they can challenge you. That only works for so long, and Abbott and his type see the world slipping away from him. This is the wave of bigotry that swept Trump to power. People who saw, but equality means I don't literally control everything and everything doesn't come to me by default. I don't like that idea. I don't like having to compete on merit, because on merit I will do quite badly, and that all gets wrapped up into, no, it's not me wanting a system to cover for my inadequacies. It's like, no, it's terrible change and Western civilization and, oh, dearie me, all these great, wonderful things need to be preserved, and they're not great, wonderful things, or they would be preserved. And I feel like this speech of Abbott's, while a lot of people have simply made fun of him, and I was really tempted to just make fun of him and say, how stupid do you have to say stuff that not only makes no sense in and of itself, calling science, rigorous peer-reviewed science, calling that voodoo and animal sacrifice, and calling your feelings the truth. But he's actually just taken all that stuff to an extreme where he could contradict himself within his speech. Global warming's not real, but it would be good if it was because we get a bit warmer. People die in cold weather more than they do in hot weather. Incidentally, statistically, in the world today, that's true. There are spikes in deaths, usually from older people, in winter that aren't matched by spikes in deaths in summer. Yet. But, hey, Abbott can take one little bit of science and say, oh look, statistical analysis shows cold better than hot. And then ignore the thousands of pieces of research that show hot will soon be much, 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 much worse than cold, where we will get repeated extreme weather situations, storms that cost trillions of dollars, droughts that destroy food production, and rising sea levels that put whole coastlines and island nations underwater. He can ignore all of that, but take this one little thing. Historically, cold has killed more people than hot, and say, therefore, more hot better than more cold. And I don't want an ice age either, but that isn't going to happen. But the science tells us climate change and global warming is going to happen and have catastrophic effects. And so Abbott can not only say stuff that's not true, he can contradict himself within the speech multiple times. Oh, there isn't more CO2 in the air. But plants need CO2, so CO2 is good. So it doesn't matter if there is more. It's the classic denial and obfuscation you learn when it's like, hey, you know what? If you're on the losing side, don't argue the facts. Just skew the argument and make it impossible to have a rational argument. It's really bizarre to me to look around the world today and see conservatives be the exact thing they say they don't like in left-wingers. When I say conservatives, I mean these loudmouths who are basically in the public eye, whether it's in the media or government. But saying stuff like, oh, the left, it's all about their feelings. And there are many, many examples of people on the left saying stupid stuff about their feelings should trump any objective reality. But this is the narrative we get from the conservatives now, particularly with climate change. Here's a mountain of irrefutable peer-reviewed science. Oh, but I feel that the truth is something different. It's like, oh, look at those poor little libtard snowflakes that are so upset about a simple thing like institutional racism. And then it's like, oh, they didn't respect the flag. I'm going to lose my shit. It's like, I have real trouble with that mindset that criticizes the other for the exact thing they're doing. And when I look at Abbott, it's like, okay, there are basically two possibilities. One, there is something evil and calculated and completely amoral in what he's doing, in that he knows he's going against the truth, but for his own lust for power and wanting to have an impact on society, he'll do it anyway. Or he's completely fucking lost it, and this is some cry for help. He doesn't even realise how stupid he's being. I mean, those are not great things to choose from, really, are they? Somebody who has a public voice, using that voice to discredit science and scientists who are trying to save everyone's life, or someone who is so disconnected from reality that they don't even see what they're doing themselves, even though everyone else does. His whole party is trying to sideline him. Even his supporters have had enough of his bullshit. But he seems so driven by his ideology, he can even delude himself into thinking, no, everyone will come to recognize my genius and I will rise to be the conservative star again. Even though everybody, apart from him apparently, knows he is electoral poison. He has alienated enough of a majority of the Australian population. If he were in control of the Liberal Party, they'd be completely marginalised. He doesn't seem completely on top of that. He seems to have a vision of himself as a significant man in history. I think he will go down in history, but as a bizarre, horrific aberration of somebody who for one moment was in the public eye and did everything in their power to turn back centuries of progress, to return to some weird authoritarian religious past. I think he will go down in history, just not the way he wants to.